Scot Heathman inspires CEOs to frontline leaders to command with courage so they can unleash the force within their team, ignite their innovative spirit, and skyrocket their bottom line. With over 25 years of experience leading and commanding teams from 3 to 36,000, his coaching, training, and speaking programs inspire his clients to lead with reliability, respect, and embrace their vulnerability for positive change. Scott was recently awarded the Emotional Intelligence Facilitator of the Year by the International Association of Top Professionals and is a co-author of the book, The Military Effect. Let's see what other buzzworthy things we can learn from this extraordinary professional. Welcome to the show, Scott. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. I'm excited to be here.
Now, you're calling in from just off of Scott Air Force Base. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we're kind of, not quite in the middle of the country, but the biggest city to the west of me, about 20 minutes, is St. Louis. So to give
Oh,
you
that's a
some
gorgeous
geography there.
space.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. My wife and I we're just moved from mid-state Illinois in Springfield, Illinois to Virginia. And we loved St. Louis. That was a beautiful, beautiful space there. Now, the Air Force brought you to Scott Air Force Base area, right?
It did. Yeah. A couple times, but yeah, this was the last time. And just retired in 2022, in the fall of 2022, after just a little over 25 years in the Air Force.
Dang,
So
congratulations and
thank
thank you
you.
for your service. Um, a fellow airman, both of us Air Force, both flyers.
Yep.
Were you a pilot?
I flew KC-135s and C-17s, and I think we may have actually been deployed together. We didn't even know it, way back in the day.
Yeah, I
So,
think we were looking at some dates there. I'm like, wait a second. I was in that same same arena there. That's hilarious. Yes, I was a mission crew with AWACS, so I always messed with my pilot friends. I'm like, you guys are just overglorified bus drivers. Like,
yeah, we really are. I
yeah.
mean, it's funny you say that because in third grade, when you used to be able to take those little bubble sheet surveys and it tells you what you're going to be when you grow up.
Oh yeah,
Mine,
totally.
mine said gas station attendant or bus driver, and it's funny that I flew a KC-135 tanker and a C-17 airlift. I'm
There's
like,
something to be said. I think they need to bring them
it's
back.
dead on. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. I don't even remember what mine said. But that's okay because not knowing allowed me to do a lot of different things over the years. So that's awesome. So since you retired, you started a consulting business. And now what's the name of the business again?
It's called Elevating Others. Yep. I
Awesome.
started that, just because I kind of had a vision in my mind that I wasn't going to be flying. That was something that I decided years ago that I really didn't want to go down the airline path.
Oh
Um,
gosh. Yeah, you
and
saved yourself a lot of heartache there.
Well, yeah, you never know. I mean, there's good hiring years, bad hiring years. I mean, it's a very dynamic environment.
Oof.
I love flying, but I just didn't think I wanted to do that the rest of my life. So I
Yeah.
wanted to try something a little bit challenging, and I
Mhm.
love seeing those aha moments in people when I was leading men and women in the Air Force, and I'm like, I love teaching. Like
Mm.
I am in my happy place when I feel like I'm helping someone, and I'm also learning in the process. So, to me, consulting through coaching, speaking, and training was
Mm.
the best place I could land. And why not do it on your own and own your own calendar? You know,
There you go. As an enlisted flyer, I had some power, but only when I was in the air. And then, when we would do the long sorties, so it'd be about up to 18 hours, and then have
hmm
to come back on the ground and realize I'm just another airman and being told what to do. And so when I got out, it was funny because I was like, I am unhireable. And when I started my business, it was actually a recording studio. And it only took me about 6 months to realize that was a horrible business plan because surviving off of starving musicians was not a way to
it's a
make a lot.
challenge. Yeah.
But I loved my music and all that good stuff. But eventually became a consultant as well. And I think that I share that same sentiment in that, being a consultant and helping people uncover what they already know,
Yeah.
right? Like we
Yeah.
have the answer in us. Like consultants don't know any more than what I mean, as consultants, we have
Yeah.
consultants, right? And so when
Yeah.
we talk with consultants, like, well, what are you going to teach me? And you're not getting taught things. You're uncovering what's already there, right? And
Yeah.
you looking from the inside out, you're never going to see it. And that's why consultants will never go away. And so so tell us a little bit about who you enjoy serving as a consultant and a coach.
Yeah. So funny enough, I love giving back to the federal government. So in one capacity, I've been teaching a lot, multi-day leadership development courses, coaching, and because I can kind of speak the language a little bit, even being within the Department of Defense, I think most federal employees kind of have a DNA about them that, we're generally here because we believe in this thing called the United States of America, and we want to do good for our nation. It's at some level, right?
Mhm.
Whether you're working in the park system or the Federal Reserve or the Department of
Mhm.
Defense or Department of State, it doesn't matter.
Right.
But I love that I can continue to give back to a much broader area of the government. But
Mm.
also, I love being able to take all the leadership and training and school and education. And I mean, how much the military pours education into us. There's so many
Mm.
opportunities.
Mm.
I love being able to bring that into the corporate sector
Right.
and working with corporate leaders, whether it's CEO, C-suite levels, mid-level managers. I like showing them different ways to approach, like you said, problem sets, tough
Mm.
conversations, realizing their own levels of emotional intelligence and how to utilize their
Mm.
strengths to their advantage. A lot of
Mhm.
them, I'm finding that they have not had that type of training or education or intentional development like I thought they did, like you and I would get in the military,
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's fun. I feel a little bit bad at times, but like you said, it's about evoking awareness, shining a spotlight on a gap that they have and
Mhm.
see if they're willing to lean into that.
Yes. I
It takes some nudging at times.
Oh, yeah. I think I mean, you can only lead a horse to water, right? But I mean,
Yeah.
let's go back to the fact that yes, in the military we get a lot of training. One of the things that I don't think that a lot of us get is the emotional intelligence training.
Mhm.
And that was something you brought up there, and it's something you've won an award for. Uh, and I just find it fascinating because when I finally was, you know, it got into my peripheral that I'm like this emotional, the EQ, right?
Yeah.
And the emotional intelligence and like what effect your emotional intelligence has on how you move through life,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You know,
We're
and
emotional
the
creatures.
exactly. And it's funny because, so many, one of the things I finally have like my latest epiphany with EQ, because it's like, you never get done with EQ. It's not like you're like, all right, I'm at 100%
Yeah.
EQ. Yay. No,
Yeah.
it's like, I was talking with Gino Wickman, who's huge in EQ. And he's a author of Traction and EOS
Mhm.
Life and stuff like that. And in his new book, he's talking about the fact it's like you're just iterating, and you're just continually to go up that ladder that you will never find the top of. But my last epiphany with EQ was the fact that there's people go into two camps: things that happen to them or
Mhm.
happen for them,
Yeah.
and there's no other, right? Like you either have one of those two mindsets. And so the people who things happen to them always end up finding a way through victimhood. Now, sometimes they get successful through that, right? They find the pain, they focus the pain, and they break through it. But that's the people who go, this happened for me,
Yeah.
that I find are the most fascinating. And I'm learning how to be that person better every time it's something that happens for me as well, because it's that learning experience, right? Like whether you're going through a bankruptcy and you're like, why is this happening to me? Or why is this happening for me? What door is this opening? So my question here is like, How do you tap into people's EQ who have never been trained or read about emotional intelligence?
I think the first thing that people really truly need to understand, and you kind of alluded to this, is we all have it. All right.
Mm-hmm.
We just have varying levels. But
Mm.
emotional intelligence is not just a singular skill set. There's components to it. And we have
Yes.
peaks and valleys, strengths and areas that we could grow a little bit.
Mm.
And again, like you said, if you take an assessment, the point is not to get 100. The point is to understand where you're at and then apply strategies in some of these areas or components to help you maneuver through certain things like relationships or
Mm.
collaborations, or might be a one-on-one feedback session with somebody. So for instance, when we look at the spectrum of EQ here, the components, you're talking about the foundational piece, which is self-awareness. Like
Mm-hmm.
that has to be there in some form or fashion before you're going
Mm.
to get anywhere to getting to
Mm.
relationship development and cultivation. But then
Mm.
you take a look at self-management. I may still have, and I may still be angry after something that was said in the meeting, but how I respond is another thing. Do you
Yes.
fly off the handle, or do you maybe go outside and walk around the building and practice breathing for a second,
Some walk
before you
around,
respond, right? Um, but then there's once you get those components of self kind of, incorporated into your life, you're applying strategies, you're better able to maneuver through social awareness and then ultimately relationship management.
right? I love
And
it.
so now it's not just looking at your emotions, it's actually being able to see the emotions and those around us. So
Mm.
I think understanding, first of all, where your peaks and valleys are, and then if you want to work on a little bit of a valley, a little area of growth, well, then you pick just a couple strategies to work on. So for me in particular, it was self-management. That was one of my weaker areas of the four areas.
Mm.
And, I started looking at, well, yeah, there are times when maybe I do get a little moody quickly, or, I don't always think before I act. What are
Mm.
some of those things that I could do? And like I said, one of them, when you're a base commander and you're practicing self-management strategies, mine was go walk around the building a few times.
Mm.
Just
Mm.
breathe, take things
Right.
in,
Mm.
ask questions instead of saying something and filling the space. Sit back and say, tell me more about that,
Mm.
which gives me more time to react, not with my limbic brain, but my more
Mm.
rational thinking brain, you know?
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
and I can't remember who said this, but I heard this somewhere. It might have been Simon Sinek. But he talked about, leadership can really be whittled down to management of cortisol levels
Oh,
in
yes.
people.
I think I've heard him talk about that. Yes.
Yeah. If you can manage cortisol levels, levels
Mhm.
of stress within your team, you're a
Mm.
pretty good leader, because
Yes.
that's really what you're doing with emotional intelligence is you're aware of what raises your cortisol levels, everything from how you eat to sleep to the way you process information to looking at other people, and how are your emotions mirroring now in your employees,
Oh,
you know?
exactly. Oh, yeah.
So
And I
it's
think
uh,
that's
it's
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 so funny
fascinating.
it's funny that you say that because it's like people don't realize as leaders when you first start being a leader, you think that everybody is like you, right? Like I was there, I was right along
Oh
with the
yeah.
airman, that was right next to me, and then I'm now the commander, right? What made me any different than that person except that I got promoted and they didn't? So we
Hmm.
have this, and that happens in all sorts of life. Like you could be a line worker and then become a supervisor. Well, what's the difference between me and the buddy I was just swinging hammers with? To us, our I don't know which part of the brain it is, but in our subconscious, we're thinking that, hey, we're all thinking the same way, right? We just all
Yeah.
think we think the same way. And it's amazing how hard it is for, I mean, I feel like it's easier to look in and say, this is how I feel. But that empathy is the next level empathy is when it's like, hey, listen, this person's processing different than you, and
Yeah.
having that emotion, that the emotional intelligence to be patient enough for them to come around to it and not just give it to them. Right. Because I think that good leaders are the ones who lead, not push, right?
Yeah.
You're showing them the way, not throwing them the way. Right? Like some
Yeah.
of you are like, here are all the answers. Now shut up and get it done. Like, yeah, you're a manager. You're not a leader, right?
Yeah,
Type of person,
exactly.
right? Yeah. And
Well,
so go ahead.
I was going to say that's such a hard transformation for all of us, though, because,
Hmm.
in our jobs, we get raises and promotions and more responsibility based on the kind of work we do and the performance that we have, right? So we're rated on performance as doers for all these years.
Hmm.
And the
Hmm.
next thing you know, you're now the
Hmm.
leader. And so
Mm,
you're bringing in all this experience as a doer,
mm,
yet you haven't transformed your mindset into it's not so much doing anymore. It's
mhm,
actually visioning, cultivating
mm,
a culture,
mhm.
understanding people. If they were icebergs below the surface of the water, there's so much more to
Right.
people, right? So
100%. Mhm.
you can't be manager equipped anymore. You may have to wear that hat from time to time and keep the
Sure.
trains running on time, but you're now the visionary. You're
Mhm.
you're supposed to be the point of inspiration. You're supposed to hold people accountable, all that stuff. And
Right.
that's not something I think a lot of folks really take the time or a class or coaching to really investigate how do I shift from doer to leader. And that's where I
Mm.
know a lot of CEOs struggle is they haven't gone through that transformation.
I
So,
totally agree with that because, for me as a CEO, it in the early days, we most CEOs in service-based businesses, and especially in the professional arena, the professional services, is that we start as the technician,
mhm,
right? And so literally the doer, and being able to pull ourselves out of the doing to leading means that we have to accept that the next person's doing is only going to be able to do it about 80% as well as you, or as your
yeah,
perception of how what you think is perfect, right? And so you're always looking for people to do it exactly what you did, and it's like nobody does it the same way you do it. Nobody's going to
yeah,
do it with the same amount of passion as you. And you have to be okay with that. And so then your job is then give them the vessel to at least aspire to 90% as good as you. Right. And that right there, 9 times out of 10 will be 100% better than most people expect. It's okay. Right. We're,
yeah,
we're, we're almost perfectionists when it's our piece, like, oh, this is my expertise and I want it perfect every time. Right.
yeah,
And so, being a marketing consultant, I have to, it's probably one of the hardest ones. It's probably kind of the same in the type of leadership consulting you do, in that, like, if you had somebody doing the consulting right next to you, they're going to do it so much different than you because they have a
oh,
different style
totally,
of consulting, right? But as long
exactly,
as the output is the same, we're all good. Like, the client got what they
yeah,
needed and they went through it. It's like, okay. And I think that as leaders in anything that you're doing, going from the doing to supervising to managing to leading, right? There's like those three tiers there. And I just don't think that we get that training. I mean, I wish that even in the
yeah,
military, I don't think we go to, officers school, there's airman leadership school, there's NCO schools, and they talk about it, but they don't really teach you the EQ. They don't really teach you what it means to be a leader, amongst equals, even, because sometimes you're leading amongst the same rank, right? How many
yeah.
times?
Peer leading is some of the most challenging because they don't necessarily have to listen to you because you were just one of them, like
Right.
yesterday, right? So, but you're right. It's you almost need to reverse engineer sometimes some of these things, and you can go too far though too. So maybe you've watched a lot of leaders and you think being an autocratic style of leadership is the way to go, but it doesn't fit you. But you're trying it anyway, and of course it's not working because it's not authentic to you and it's probably not even situationally important at the time, but that's just the way you've trained yourself. You can go too far that way, and you got to get back to understanding what kind of leadership styles do your teammates resonate with? What kind of learning styles do they have? Do you have a bunch of extroverts in the room? That's pretty hard to manage. How do you get those things under control, or how do you keep the one introvert from being sidelined, who probably is the genius in the room that you really need to hear from? So you
Mhm.
really need to start dissecting, I think, human beings more when you become a leader. That's where the bulk of your time and effort is spent, or should be spent, is in understanding human dynamics in order to garner the highest level of performance out of them. Because at the end of the day, EQ is not just some soft skill. It's all about performance. If I can get that right, or teach that, or at least evoke some awareness to areas that they can get better, I can get that team humming, and now they're performing at a much higher level, which could look like on a profit loss sheet as a 15 to 20% increase in revenue, just because they're getting along with each other better, getting along with customers better, they're listening to each other better. We're not dealing with all of this drama that's wasting time, which is money, right? So that's the way I look at some of these soft skills, as that to me is money opportunity lost if we don't address it. So it's important that we lean into these things. And I think it's important, as you mentioned, leaders probably do need to have a coach. I have a coach. Even though I coach, I have a coach. I mean, so it helps
Mhm.
me to make sure that, one, my business and myself are operating at the highest levels that I can possibly gain out of it. So I think it's just important to have somebody to have by your side and talk openly and transparent with you and be a little bit vulnerable with.